Hey kid, do you like war? War is cool. At least when it's not real. A gajillion people all killing each other, wacky fights, drama, suspense, romance. With something as emotional as a war, it becomes easier to sell these big deal moments. But what is a war? And what makes it fun to watch?
Very!
That's what I will be exploring today. I'm gonna show how a war is done well using a manga I love and recommend, Kingdom. And I'm gonna show how to squander a war and make it suck using everyone's favorite punching bag, Naruto. Quick note, I will be spoiling these chapters and episodes. People tend to like both, so maybe give them a try first and come back here later. Especially Kingdom. What? It's only on chapter 752? You don't have time for that? Zoomer baby need his TikTok anime to be short and sweet? Also, I would recommend the manga over the anime for Kingdom specifically, cause, like, whoa. And I will not pronounce a single name correctly. So first, what makes a war distinct from a battle, a skirmish, or just a plain old fight? Well, it's the number of people. Don't look at that! I don't care if Captain America says a 6v6 is a civil war, cause it's not. It's a civil disturbance. Any other things, like whether the sides are from different countries, the weapons used, or the kill count could technically exist in a non-war situation. So ultimately, if you want a good war, you have to utilize what makes it a war in the first place, the soldiers. In order for soldiers to be utilized well, strategy needs to be employed. Otherwise, it would just be two giant hordes slamming into each other. While the spectacle of that can be cool, once it wears off, it's hard to feel engaged by the war itself. This is why a lot of media uses war as a backdrop while it focuses on a smaller team that works around it. The story may cover the solving of a mystery that will help end the war, or how people lived leading up to the war, or the brutality of a war and how people become animals when faced with such horrifying sights. But rarely do they focus on the war itself. However, Kingdom and Naruto both tried to cover stories about characters fighting a war on the front lines. The example I will be using for Kingdom is the KO campaign, which is the second arc of the series in the first war. The setup is simple. Shin signs up for the earliest war he can now that he's a free man. If he performs well, he could move up in rank. Shin's state, Kin, is invading Wei to take the strategically valuable city of KO. Since this section's about using soldiers well, I'm going to list out the strategies used throughout this entire arc. I divided the strategies into active and passive strategies. Passive strategies are pre-established factors that keep the soldiers organized, like methods of communication. Active strategies will be choices made during battle that directly impact the soldier's performance, such as pulling off a flank. For this list, keep in mind how each strategy uses soldiers. If the strategy needs soldiers to work, it reinforces the value of the war. So, starting with passive strategy, 5-man units are the basic grouping for infantry to follow, each having a squad leader. Other groupings exist, such as 1,000-man commanders like Heki and Bakukoshin. Both armies attempt to capitalize on morale swings. Taku establishes a 5-man game plan: stay close, back to back, attack together, and defend together. This is broken pretty quickly. Flags are used to communicate with soldiers. Formations are used frequently to try and optimize performance. Major players are targeted, such as commanders and generals, rather than just trying to destroy literally everyone. Cavalry is superior to infantry, so they are used more carefully. Wei technology is generally superior. They use things like chariots and repeating crossbows. And next, we have active strategy. So starting off, we have Wei moving their army to the Dogsong plains rather than allowing Kin to siege KO. This is to utilize their war chariots in favorable terrain. Along with this, Wei gets to Dogsong first and secures the high ground. When Kin arrives, their army charges the Wei army, which employs a shield wall. But Shin leaps over the wall alone to create a weak point that his allies can focus on and funnel through.
You can fly? No. Jump good.
Because of this, Wei's infantry is pushed back, so Wei sends their war chariots to mitigate losses. But the Kin cavalry chooses to hold its position while the Wei chariots demolish their infantry. In response, Kyokai recommends building ramparts of corpses to block the chariot's next wave. The Wei chariots respond by circling back where the ramparts are less supported. Since Shin lucks out and gets a horse, Kyokai recommends aiming for the wheels of the chariot rather than the riders, allowing Shin to perform some amount of counterplay with spears. Dukyo notices Shin's group finding success and mobilizes the cavalry to support Shin's position as the Wei infantry advances again. Since Wei is advancing downhill, Bakukoshin mobilizes his unit to perform a counter-offensive, using Wei's momentum to more quickly break through the line. When the Wei chariots return to Shin's position again, Dukyo mobilizes the 1st and 2nd Army's cavalry to counter. Bakukoshin, after breaking through Wei's infantry, uses dust and favorable terrain to conceal his unit's movements. However, when they're found, Bakukoshin's cavalry uses their infantry as a distraction to slow the enemy chase. Since the cavalry is getting close to Wei HQ, Wei General Kyugen defends his HQ using archers. Shin responds by riding in front of Bakukoshin to body block arrows. Since Shin and Bakukoshin are successful in taking the hill, Wei's commanding general Gokei moves the main army to retake it. Oki sees a cool hill he wants to climb, which freezes Gokei's main army between the two hills. Gokei responds with a defensive formation targeting Oki. With Gokei's attention split, Dukyo mobilizes his personal cavalry to strike the now open side of the Wei main army. Wei shifts formations to respond to Dukyo's advance, though it's unsuccessful. So Gokei orders his mobile units to pincer Dukyo's wedge formation. Heki advances to assist Dukyo by further pincering the unit that's pincering Dukyo. Heki decides to maintain distance in his pincer to pressure the enemy, rather than immediately attacking. Gokei responds to the rapidly approaching Dukyo by sending officer hunters as a final line of defense. But Shin distracts and kills one of the hunters by moving ahead of his unit. You probably noticed this, but check out the flow, bro. When an army makes a move, the other responds. There's a push and pull to the tide of war. This makes the army feel like it's alive, reacting to things as they change. Rather than the army and named characters being explicitly distinct, the nameless soldiers act as extensions of these named characters. I'll elaborate on this a bit more later. Now you might be wondering, oh dearest Jompo, my lovely YouTube man, why the fuck did you include chucking spears at wheels as a strategy when that hardly impacted anything? Great question. Please keep this question in mind as we move into Naruto's war. For Naruto, I chose the southern battle in the Land of Lightning. Why? Because Madara's in it, so it holds a lot of narrative weight, and it has the most coverage of a singular front. So, the first passive strategy in Naruto is that Kabuto tracks the status of his resurrected soldiers through his jutsu. Special sealing tools are used to counter Kabuto's reincarnation jutsu. There's a designated team that seals when they can, a communications team, and a medic team, so teams exist. Synced, multi-user jutsu are used. Long-range communications can be achieved using ninja telepathy. And people use feints, like when Naruto first attacks the Raikage. For active strategy, we start out with Gaara and the Tsuchikage retreating from the baddies to buy some time. Gaara and the Tsuchikage can't lose any more ground and are forced to attack using long-ranged methods, leaving their infantry behind, seemingly to create an opening. After Gaara throws dead mom sand at his dad, every ninja is ordered to attack at once. No idea why they needed to wait, because no opening was made. Tamari says to surround them, so the infantry makes a circle. They don't really do anything though, and fall over when the clam appears. Since the enemy Kage are being mind-controlled but not mouth-controlled, they help the army by explaining their moves. Naruto arrives as reinforcements. The second Mizukage is left to infantry, but they can't hit him or figure out how to dispel his jutsu. To counter the Raikage, wind users are gathered to go up against him. When the Raikage powers up, Dodai calls for a retreat. The earth users create a wall but ignore further instruction, failing completely. Tamari tells everyone to pull the wounded out of the fight, and that they should stay away because the Raikage is too strong. The entire army is told not to attack, so Naruto can solo the Raikage. Since the Raikage's armor can't be pierced by anything but himself, Naruto deflects his attack back into himself. A sensory guy uses sensory jutsu to see the Mizukage hiding behind a rock. The Mizukage decides to not explain how to beat him so his enemies can get stronger through experience. Kabuto respawns Madara since he is on the back foot. Kurama gives Naruto his chakra as backup. The good Raikage, good Mizukage, and Tsunade teleport in to fight too. They use team attacks. Tsunade uses her regeneration as bait. Madara shows Hashirama's face in an attempt to demoralize the Kages, but it doesn't work. Itachi targets the Edo Tensei user. And that's everything. Look at how the military is used. When they have a task, they swarm the enemy and fail. Then a strong dude tells everyone to leave so they can 1v1. An army doesn't show up as reinforcements, Naruto does, or 3 Kages. Units don't really do anything to support each other, either every soldier goes in, or every soldier comes out. Kingdom has its share of one-on-one fights, but the individual rarely trumps the group. In Korigen's case, it wasn't a strategy, he's just a prideful idiot who let the enemy through because he thought himself too mighty to lose. Dukyo is the strongest warrior in his army, but needed his soldiers to support him to reach Gokei, and targets only Gokei because it's the best way to destroy the chain of command. Gokei chooses to duel not because it's the best plan, but because he's vengeful. None of these can be explained with, "Hey, God arrived, everyone should back up," like it can in Naruto. Really, what would be the difference in Naruto's war if I just did this? If every soldier is completely useless, why not let them stay home to play Ninja Minecraft and let the gods duke it out? Look, I know it makes in-universe sense for a war to happen. Reasonably, you would mobilize every ninja you can to save the world, but I'm not saying it's bad because it doesn't make sense. I'm saying it's bad because when you write a story, you have complete control over where the story goes. Kishimoto chose to make it a war with a big army. It was a choice. Obito could have just as well said, "I will bring 50 of my greatest ninja to battle your 50 representatives. If you reject this challenge, I will summon thousands and plunge the world into war." But hey, maybe that's less flashy, huh? And if it doesn't work with the lore, well, Kishimoto's an author, so he could just change that too. But Naruto is focused on individual characters, so it's fine if the war part of the war arc is secondary to the character growth, right? Kingdom is a shining example of why this way of thinking doesn't make sense. You don't have to sacrifice one aspect of your story for another. In the same Kingdom arc I mentioned before, with all its good war strategy, it still finds time to build characters. Bakukoshin and Heki argue about how to command troops, and Heki is forced to realize that there is no ideal war. He can't save everyone, sacrifices must be made to achieve victory. Bihei blows chunks because he's a weak coward, but forces himself to advance anyway to protect his friends and family. Shin receives advice that makes him realize just how lofty of a goal he has by trying to become a great general of the heavens, but his role as a headstrong dreamer is reinforced by how he accepts the challenge anyway. Not only this, but since each unit is led by a specific named character, the army becomes an extension of that character. If the commander is a man who is willing to throw his life away for victory, so are his soldiers. If the general is more tactical, his unit will be more cautious and by the books. This means that when nameless soldiers make a move to fight, you can still feel the presence of the named characters that lead them. In Naruto, the nameless soldiers exposit dialogue about who certain enemies are and then get steamrolled in battle. Instead of the army being written like an extension of any character, it feels like they're just background noise distracting from what really matters. Not once did I wonder what Gaara was like as a leader of his men. If a soldier was from the Rock Village, Leaf Village, whatever, it doesn't matter, because they all act exactly the same. Imagine if the Sand Ninja were more conniving, which would match their representation in the Konoha Crush arc. Konoha Crush? Is that what they called it? Konoha Crush? This could juxtapose another village's more courageous, straightforward take on fighting. By establishing an army's strategy, you can reinforce a leader's personality and the village's culture. Now, Naruto and the other ninja in his world have superpowers, so maybe the intent is to simply show off how strong a legendary character is by melting massive groups of losers. And I think that's actually a fair point. Madara's arrival is a huge deal. He is almost completely invincible. If you want to make the reader think, "Oh god, this seems hopeless," then having a broken villain enter the fray is one way of doing it. But let's all think about the most impactful way of delivering this message. When Madara dropped asteroids on the army, it was cool, but did you really feel floored by how strong he was?
Barnacles! What could be worse than a giant
Asteroid.
Oh, I know. 2 giant
Asteroids.
No!
I think it's memorable, but personally, I didn't lose hope until I saw the 5 Kage beaten and battered. The reason being is that the army up to this point was incompetent. Any of the villains in this arc could have destroyed the army if the Narubermensch weren't there, maybe just not as quickly as Madara did. But if the army was competent and used strategy to fight and actually do damage to these powerful bad guys, imagine the difference then. The army could try a bunch of legitimate, coordinated attacks and synchronized jutsu that worked previously, but Madara is beyond even that. I won't go into detail about some of Kingdom's later fights, because I want you to read it and feel what I felt, but thanks to the mystic techniques some characters have and from the way they coordinate devastating attacks on opposing armies, you can legitimately find enemies who seem untouchable. But it's thanks to the usual strategies not working that these characters seem so strong. Even that first war I mentioned has an example of this. Shin's group surviving the chariots isn't a big deal just because he survived, it's because everyone else died. Shin is an exception. If almost every soldier survived and attacked the chariots, Shin would just be another soldier. In the same way that if every enemy could wipe out the nameless ninja horde, what's one more? In Kingdom, people with special powers and techniques can deal more damage solo than other soldiers, but they can't win the war alone. Oki says something that reveals Yasuhisa Hara's philosophy when it comes to writing Kingdom that I think can seemingly describe Naruto. Ultimately, war belongs to its generals. In the same way that war is entirely controlled by the Kage, Naruto, Madara, Obito, and a few others. But the difference is that Oki precedes this statement with another. Over the course of this long era of warfare, the size of armies has continuously increased year after year, all the way till now where we war with hundreds of thousands of men. However, as armies have grown larger, the talents of its generals have also become more and more crucial as to whether one is victorious or is defeated. A general is not great because they can defeat an army alone. They are great because they are the only ones who can guide their army to victory. It may seem subtle, but this emphasis on leading an army, rather than being a one-man army, is a far better way of writing a satisfying war. So, if you do want to check out Kingdom, there isn't an official English translation, but the fan translation is actually really good. Once you get through the first 2 arcs, you'll know if Kingdom is for you or not, since the second arc is more representative of what comes after. Give it a try, let me know if you like it. Subscribe if you want. I also stream at Consume Jompo, and I have a Twitter if you want to follow me there. Thanks for watching.